Welcome to our podcast. Your next big project is you. And this is our version of a top 10 hit parade. I've been privileged to interview a number of folks, leaders, managers, coaches, to really rewind their lives and their careers to talk about their journeys to success. So when you think about this and listen to some of these clips that we're sharing with you around living a life of significance, around living a life with no regrets, around living a life with abundance, with gratitude, with the quest to be your best, having perspective in your life, and ultimately to live your legacy, not just to leave it, but to live it right now. Enjoy this as you're thinking about the next 5 to 25 years of your life at some point as well. See you in our next podcast. Those other lessons, Bob, that you're learning through stewardship.
You know, I wish that, I'll give you a little story, Leo, and I've probably told this to you before, but I think it's instructive. Two things happened to me that affected my focus a little bit on my career. But one was my brother dying of melanoma, and then within 2 or 3 months, a good friend of mine died of a heart attack, and he happened to be my age, which at that time was 52 years of age, and I somehow that took a part of me, and I can't quite put my hands on exactly what it took, but it took a lot out of me in both scenarios. And I think unfortunately it was probably the biggest signal of all. And I remember when I would turn 55, I had another 5 years left before I retired at PwC, and had a chance to do a couple jobs on a global basis. And I decided not to do it. I decided to retire, as you know. And I promised myself, and maybe it was a pact with God at the time, and my spirituality kind of increased a little bit as well, but that I was going to do everything I could to give my talents to other people. That I was given a lot, and I was blessed, and I wanted to be able to give as much as I could. And I'll tell you that the most significant part of this journey now, up to age 66, would be my experience with working with St. Bonaventure University and being the chair of the board there, and working with 30 national leaders on the board, and really help shaping that university to what it's become today. I think it's one of the most rewarding things, frankly, that I've done. And I've been involved with some. I used to tell people when I was at PwC, I had the greatest job in the world at that inception of the merger. I mean, I had a phenomenally great job to help shape the existence of what that firm looks like today. And I still put St. Bonaventure. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, in tomorrow, it could be something yet very different if I'm open to it. It could be something very different that makes me get challenged, that makes me realize I can affect somebody in a way that I never even began to dream. You have to be available to it. And if you're not available to it and riding the rocket ship, and you bring no perspective, then it's awfully easy to forget and not see what's right there in front of you.
What I watched over that period of time was people who had an idea that they were searching for. They were looking for something. They're looking for something that's inside them. There's a feeling that they have that they haven't found it. And what I think they had come to Arizona looking for was to see whether or not that would be revealed. And when I say revealed, I mean revealed to them. So if they really knew how to figure it out, they wouldn't necessarily have had to make the trip, right? But I think a lot of us start to look when we've had this benefit of these careers that have been remotely, even remotely successful. We're able to turn around for a minute and say, that was a great run. Now what? And the now what part begins to align you with the headset of the typical retiree who says, yeah, I had this great job. You know my dad, and he was a terrific pioneer in the medical profession. He had no plan for when he retired, as compared to my mother, who had a laundry list going long before she got there. So it's an approach. And I think what people are looking for is that way to safely reveal to themselves what it is they want, what it is they feel. I think some people are afraid of what they might find. And we saw that people were able to share. And when you start sharing. And I think the thing that you facilitated in that program that was so marvelous was that people began to share. And you know that when you share, when you speak, when you teach, you start learning yourself. And you could tell with the emotions that came forward sometimes quite unexpectedly and very unexpectedly to the people that were doing the emoting. So,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that's just an incredible thing, because that's really what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is not the process of discovery. Mindfulness is the process of getting the crap out of the way so it can then pop up and you can see it.
And one of the key areas is living a life of significance, making a meaningful difference in the lives of others. What does that mean to you when you think about some of those relationships of people's lives that you were able to impact over the years?
When I hear that question, Leo, the first thing that comes to mind is that all these people made a difference in my life.
Right.
Every single one of them made a difference in my life. What I tried to do was be in a position and support them and support their families in whatever it is that they were striving to do. So that's the first comment. But thinking more about this, it's what's being the next project is me, and for others the next project is them. It made me think about the move I made from the investment business to the music business. And that move was all about me sitting down and thinking, okay, like for the first time in my life, I'm thinking about me and my family. Mm. I'm putting myself, okay, what's important to me? What do I want to do? Where do I want to go with the next stage of my life? And it wasn't an easy thing to think about. You really had to get deep down into yourself, effectively deep down into your soul. I used to write things out in journals. I would be walking, maybe I'd go to a coffee shop and sit outside and have a coffee maybe in the morning. But I always carried my journal with me, and I would write out how I was feeling as I was going through this process. And I still have those journals, and from time to time I still go back through them in order to think about, or in order to see, am I still on track with what it is that was really important to me. The thing that was driving me though was to make a difference. And how was I going to be able to make a difference with my family? And how was I going to be able to make a difference in my life for others? And so I went through that 10-year experience. So I don't know if I'm answering your question when I talk about it, but it brings in a total introspection on who you are, what you're all about, and what you want to do. What I didn't have, which is something that you're proposing, is I didn't have the benefit of working with someone like you, nor did I have a benefit of working with others who are going through the same process at the same time. And looking back at what I did, I could have used that big time, because while you feel like you're the only one going through it, I certainly felt alone in it. And I think if you could have a group of people who are going through the process at the same time in order to interact with each other, you realize, first of all, that others are going through the same thing you are. You'd be surprised to find out people who are going through the same thing. Maybe it's in your family that you are. And therefore, you can help each other get through it and land on a place that's really, really important to you.
What about that discussion with your daughter, and how can we bring that more out for our listeners for today, in whatever way you're comfortable?
Well, it was interesting. So, being your background tied to the financial industry and my background for 35 years being in the financial industry, you'd call it you've sort of reached stardom, if you will. And on a Friday, May 4th, I was speaking from the New York Stock Exchange. Yep, up there on where the paddle is, and I was up there with we were doing a huge corporate thing, but from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, it's sort of the the epicenter of what you'd ever do in your career.
Right.
And from there, my wife and I flew back to Toronto later that day, and we talked to our son Spencer, who lived in Calgary, and then unfortunately we lost Spencer the next day on May 5th, and it was just like, he was 23 years of age, had the world, everything, and it's like, and he was an athlete, and he's very unfortunate. We hear about these kids training athletes that sort of just all of a sudden something gives out, and unfortunately Spencer had a irregular heart from birth that nobody knew about, and so he passed, and it was just like, we've just I think, if you will, I think I went numb. And to be honest with you, I don't know how long I was numb, but it was for an extensive period of time. I went numb. And so it was really, I've talked about it, with bereaved families many times. I've done a lot of research on this. It was even hard to put in perspective as to how could this possibly happen when somebody's got their world in front of them. I think you had met Spencer on a few occasions. He had a grin, the size of New York City. It's just huge grin, and loved life and everything like that. So, and listen, there isn't, people say, you get over things. No, you don't. No, you don't. There people say, do I miss him daily? Yeah, let me be clear. I miss him hourly every time. But saying that, it's it makes you put everything that's ever happened to anybody in perspective. And going back to what I was referring to, that led my wife to ask me when is enough, and my daughter to say, you can't fix this, and Dr. DiGilio to ask me that wonderful question, what makes me happy. And it was, as it's easy for me to say after a number of years, but it was a turning point. And I'm actually very thankful that I wouldn't wish anybody going through it, but it was a really good thing for me to put everything in perspective on not only where I was at, but more importantly, what became important in my life going forward is really what it was.
And then ultimately living your legacy. I'm curious, you've been privy to those concepts. Is there any one of those that resonates with you, John, more than the others?
Leo, it's a tough choice, because metaphorically, it's kind of like if you're going to bake a great chocolate cake, you've got the flour and the sugar and the salt, the cream, the chocolate, all these ingredients, right? And if you just gave the flour to someone and said, taste this great chocolate cake, it's terrible. You've got it's sort of an integrated system. And the exercises that still stick with me, the one where you had us go through the top 100 people that meant the most in their lives. I still have that list, and I look at that list a lot. And my regret, if there is one, is I don't reach out to those people as much as I should. And, make that a priority, where I'm going to start, whether it's a handwritten note, a quick email, a phone call, whatever it might be. But, that really is the universe of what's very important. Now, when David and I established the values for the Level 5 coaching company, we have three. One is the golden rule, which I believe in. If everybody followed the golden rule, we'd be fine. The second one is abundant thinking. And that's so important in the business world, particularly when you're dealing with people who are in a network, in an organization. They are sharing resources. They need to share their successes with others and help others. So abundant thinking, that was one of our values at Advantage as well, and that served us very well. Gratitude, the notes that we wrote to people while we were in Sabbatical X, I still have people who say to me, boy, that really touched me, that you took the time to tell me how important I was in your life and the change that, I brought to you. And that was important. But, the wheel is an easy thing to continue to refer to. And it's almost like you could pick one a week and say, today I've got my value cards too, the 10 value cards. Pick one a week. I'm going to work on this. I'm going to really work on, my gratitude this week. I think it's hard to pick one that say it's more important than the other.
You've always mentioned to me when I've checked in on you and Todd, how life is going and things, that you too embrace the concept of gratitude every day. Tell us how you practice that one.
It's this is a really lovely thing. It evolved, I think, after my first sabbatical, and it was really around being grateful at the end of every day. Like there's so much. Like when I came back from that sabbatical of my own, I realized how much that we have in life that we take for granted. And it's a very simple practice. And at the end of every day, Todd and I ask one another what we've been grateful for the day. And it can be something that was like, I had a great interchange with my dad on the phone. I had an amazing lunch that somebody prepared for me. I had a walk today and I saw the sunlight coming through the leaves and the shadow on the ground, and it made me step back in amazement at how beautiful life was. It could be, just appreciating my breath, my health. We take so many things for granted, and many people are thinking about what they don't have and what they need next. And I think this practice that we have every day, I think when we started it was a little bit more material, and now it's just the small pleasures of life, and it's the interactions, and it's the love, and it's the support we have around us, and it's the opportunities that we have in front of us, and it's up to us to choose how we're going to make the most of those.
When you hear those words, what comes to your mind, Chris, about significance or regrets or legacy?
Death. You and I and everyone listening to this or watching is closer to death now than when I started this sentence. The coolest
scary thought, brother, but true.
Well, let's have it. Let's hear it. All right. I'm presenting it in a dramatic fashion for a reason to serve. And let's also be inspired by it.
Sure.
Right. Let's say, okay, so the coolest course that I ever took at any level of education was also in the master's program, right? And it was on death. And there was a research study that we learned about that involved interviewing centenarians on what they would do different. Now, you got to listen to these old people, because when you're on death's doorstep, your bullshit filter is fully intact. So they got no reasons to lie or smudge or fudge or candy coat. Right? So they're just laying it down. And here are 3 of the most popular responses. And there was a lot of uniformity in these responses. I would take more risks. I would slow down and appreciate how magical life is without me having to do a damn thing to it or for it. Just appreciate. 3, I would be way less obsessed with my own success and way more concerned about leaving a legacy, making a difference.
Yeah.
I took that course 30 years ago, man. That stuck.
Yeah.
That's stuck. Right. So I really learned from that. I was probably 26 at the time. I'm 53 now.
Wow.
And that has guided me. I let my success be a byproduct of making a difference, being a servant. One of my great coaches I just referenced him, Steve Chandler. I learned from him. Your bank account is a direct reflection of your level of service. Look at that.
So
right
on. So right on.
Yeah. Yeah. And Bob Berg, one of the authors of The Go-Giver, he talks about that, right? That's a beautiful book too. And it's great mentality, right? Of legitimately prioritizing service. And that's part of your legacy, right? Over profit, letting profit be a byproduct, and I'm not saying, and that does not in any way mean deprioritizing, creating wealth. That's not what that means at all. I love creating wealth. That's fun, but it's not my number one driver. I let it be a byproduct. Like I'm using metrics, like paying attention. How am I creating wealth? How much am I creating wealth in this month? If it's lower than last month, then I better get service up.
Well,
and like, me. So my legacies, I don't have kids and I'm not going to have children at this stage. So that my children will not be my legacy. They will not be a part of my life. I don't have them. So my legacy is my content.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why I take it so seriously, which is why I'm so grateful to you. We are creating content right now. This will be evergreen. This will last into the interwebs forever, right? Can replace this is legacy. This is meaning. As soon as we hang up, I'm gonna feel great. I already feel great. I feel amazing right now.
What have been some of those takeaways as you sat there, in not focusing on me, but focusing on what you're learning from this and how it can help others?
Well, there's this term that I've used a lot when you talk about persistence, and it's basically your will has to exceed your skill. Right. And the thing about, I had lymphoma, I still do, but it's being managed and I expect to live many years, based on what all the doctors have told me. But, at the end of the day, there's people that say, be positive. I've talked to you about this. Be positive, be strong, fight. Yeah, I'm going to do all that. I get it. Okay. And I appreciate the comments. The best thing to say is, what can I do? What can I do to help you? I'm sorry you have to go through this. So for those of you out there that don't know what to say to people, and I didn't. When I had 3 other friends that have either passed or had it. I'm really sorry you have to go through this. What can I do? Well, just
I do
close. And then I can remember Sean, who's a football coach and a line coach and stuff like that, saying, Dad, you're going to kick this thing's ass. And I said, yeah, I am. And I remember sending something to the kids and the grandkids saying, I got this. I start chemo tomorrow. I'm going to kick this thing's ass. I'm going to get through this. Don't worry about it. You go off, like your dad told you, go back to your business, go off and do your things. I never forgot that, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I learned is you don't kick cancer's ass. It kicks your butt. Okay. And you survive. You fight it. You do fight it. Okay. And, but I think the thing that I learned more than anything was all the calls in the texts, in the emails that I got from kids that I coached and people that I work with. People that there's 2 types of people. One of our cohorts in the sabbatical talked about it. You see people walk the other way because they don't know what to say. It's not because they don't care, they don't know what to say. But the people that did call me, it made me understand the impact that I made.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty neat. Pretty neat. And it got me through it.
Tell us about Opus and some of those journeys there.
I was approached by a good friend, Don Neureiter, from the Opus Prize. He's the director of the Opus Prize until this last year. He just retired, as I did, from the Opus Prize. And Don had been working with him for 20 years. He saw what I had done in Addis Ababa on the breast cancer project and said, boy, if you're interested in working with us, we would sure like to bring you on board. So I was still working full-time as a professor, had research projects going on, and I was dealing with clients on the outside, dealing on workflow and digital photography, digital capture, because that was the earlier part of my life before working in documentary photography. I was chasing digital imaging, and I was the pioneer for that at the university. not loved for it, because people love film. So I brought it
Right.
in, and that was my passion for 15 years. Got me very tightly tied with big corporations doing consulting work, training, etc. And that was great. That was a transitionary point, but I needed to come back to the camera, Leo. I needed to come back to where my roots were, where my passion was, and start thinking about things other than making investments, how to save here, how to invest there, and those kinds of things. And that just grew and grew and grew. When I started working with the Opus Prize, it was pretty challenging. We talked about going to some countries that the CDC may not recommend that you would go to unless you take a lot of precautions. So with dealing with immunizations, preparations, how to change your diet, how to dress for these kinds of things, that's a big change in my life. So, as I may have told you in the past, as a photographer, as a photojournalist, I tend to go at a story instead of run away from it. The difference, though, between with the stories that I'm trying to tell, on the best of my ability, is to tell positive stories. I want to talk about good things that are going on this planet, not the bad things, not the conflicts that we're running into. I want to talk about those folks who are making a change. And the Opus Prize recognizes these, would you say, modern day Mother Teresas, these change makers. It recognizes them with one each year winning $1 million to help with their cause, and two others which are runner-ups that get $100,000 each. I'm not involved with that part of the process at all. I just tell the story. The board that makes those decisions on who is going to win the Opus Prize each year doesn't involve me. They don't get to see my work before they've made their decision, because I don't want to persuade them one way or another. I want to tell the story as I see it and the research that I've done on it. So that's moved into the point where I was getting more requests to travel than I could. Here's a good example of it. This was a part of the Opus Prize. I did this another pro bono activity. I built this book. They said on the 10th anniversary, we'd like you to cover the first 10 winners of the Opus Prize. I said, look, I'm a full-time professor. I can't do that. I can maybe cover one or two. Actually, I'd already covered one in example in Haiti, and another one in Malawi. So I hired some of my alums to help me with this. And it was a big project to put together a book about change makers. I had to hire youngsters who were probably in their early 30s, I would say, when they became adults, if you will. The new adult seems to happen around 28 to 30. I had to have people who had street smarts, who knew how to be safe in going into situations that may involve some danger, may involve dietary problems, those kinds of things. So that was the beginning of the second stage. Once I retired, I still hired some of these people to go to places that I wasn't able to go to. And I then learned that as media changed a lot for telling stories in the new millennium, I had to change from just making still photographs, Leo, to doing audio, video interviews, doing video work, and doing work with the drone. So we call that a one-man band, okay? I'm doing everything. And that's very challenging. Budgets were reduced. I wasn't in it for the money. I was reimbursed and paid on many of these projects, but it was mainly to help that organization serve the downtrodden, the impoverished.
Share with some of your perspectives that I know you've gleaned between the military and your private consulting and just living your life over the years about people on that pathway to achieving life's significance.
Yeah, I think, we talked about this in one of the cohorts meetings about time, this sense of time, and how sometimes it really constrains us because we think we're supposed to be a certain place, a certain status, a certain position, whatever it is. We this time element, even when you go to college, right? If you don't finish in 4 years, someone's talking about you, right? What happened? No matter what you do, there's this sense of time. And I think sometimes it constrains you. And myself, considering I'm what I call a late bloomer or a very late bloomer, I didn't get my commission as an officer until I was 40. So, and that was because I went into the Air Force Medical Service, because the other areas don't even take you at that age. So I was starting over at 40, and I was used to that. I think that's one of the biggest things I learned throughout my career is time is not an enemy. It is not an enemy. It's to your benefit and what you do with it. And people really, somehow, when you're doing things non-traditionally or out of the norm, people are just naturally willing to help, and you get a lot of support, and then you get to give back, and you do the same thing for them, and you say, hey, I remember all these people helping me, and somehow you see people struggling easier. I think it made me more in tune to diversity, to seeing people in different ways, to see when I'd see somebody, when I would be a commander and I'd have 250, 300 people I'd be staring at, I don't see them the way they are or the way they see themselves. I see them as something else. Potentially, I see all these things around them. And I used to say that to them. I don't see, because they'd say, why are you making us, you're so hard on us sometimes. Why are you making us do that? And I'd say, because I see the potential. I see it. You have to see it, and then you will be there. And so I made so many friends, and and then they helped me be successful. So we were all successful together. I think that's what's important.
I remember you were telling me, we were talking about our movie, love of movies, and you were telling me about the one line from the movie The Rookie.
Yep.
Why don't you tell us that story? I love that story about kind of finding where you need to be in life. This is another great takeaway.
Well, I thank you. I learned a long time ago through one of my mentors and coaches, Bob Beal, Biehl, that the key to finding success in life is really by the way we answer the 5 most important questions. What do you want to do? What do you want to be? What do you want to have? What do you want to give? And what do you want to leave? My sabbatical was really about turning from doing to being and attempting to find meaning in being as opposed to find meaning in doing. And I think when you find meaning in both of those, you find real joy, and you find not only joy, but you find quite a lot of success. And so, all this did was kind of prepare me for the next chapter of my life. But in doing all this, I didn't say during the sabbatical, I told everybody, left a message on my phone, and I would already received a couple of offers before, without even trying to get away. And I just said, I got to get away for 4 or 5 months and clear my mind out. So anyway, I did that. But in doing it, I read a book at least once every 3 or 4 days, and I watched a number of movies that I'd watched over the years that I loved, and I went back and watched some of the old ones. One of my favorites was Dennis Quaid in the book and in the movie The Rookie.
Yeah,
he represents a high school coach in West Texas that won the district championship, and in doing that, his boys made him promise that, Coach, if we can hit you, we can hit anybody, because you are really throwing a great fastball. And our confidence is so high. We're winning because of you. And if we win, will you go try out for the show? And he promised him he would. Well, they won the district championship. They won the by-district championship, and he was scheduled to go try out for the Texas Rangers in San Angelo, Texas, the next morning. I don't know if you recall this, but he to see his dad in the middle of the night kind of an estranged relationship with his Air Force dad. And he said, "Dad, I just don't know what to do." He said, I'm really torn. I'm a small town hero, and everybody in this town loves me. I'll never have to buy a cup of coffee the rest of my life. I've got 3 small boys and a wife, and, you know, we're really living a great life. And I don't want to leave, but I promised the boys I would. And I think I would be good at that. And I think, you know, I'm intrigued by it, but his dad just said, "Stop." He said, "Your granddaddy told me once something that I want to tell you." He says, "It's okay to do what you have to do until you find out what you're meant to do." And I think when you find the balance of being and doing together, you start to find out what you're meant to do. And it's kind of you've heard me talk about the Japanese concept of ikigai, but it's that place where concentric circles of what I'm good at, what I love to do, what I can make a reasonable living at, and what the world needs all comes together, and where your passion and your vocation and your avocation kind of come together, where every day feels like it lasts 15 minutes. And that's the joy of doing most of my career.